I never thought a wooden pier would cost me my sanity. But then again, I never expected to go toe-to-toe with Brenda Carmichael from the Sunset Cove Homeowners Association either. My name is Kyle Patterson, and I run a charter fishing business out of Port Charlotte, Florida. For 15 years, I had been living the dream on my waterfront property, a sprawling 3-acre lot with direct access to Charlotte Harbor. The property had been in my family since 1987, long before the Sunset Cove development even existed. My grandfather bought it for a song, built a modest house, and constructed a small dock for his fishing boat. When he passed, he left it to me, knowing I shared his love for the water. The property was special for several reasons. First, it had one of the few natural deep water boat launches in the area, a sloped concrete ramp that made getting boats in and out of the water incredibly easy. Second, the location was perfect for charter fishing, right where the harbor met the Gulf. Third, and this would become crucial later, my property sat between the new Sunset Cove development and the only convenient water access for miles. When the developers built Sunset Cove in 2019, they approached me about selling. I refused. They offered more money. I refused again. Finally, they asked if they could negotiate an easement for their future residents to use my boat launch. The development was planned for 40 homes, all waterfront or waterview, marketed to retirees and wealthy professionals who wanted the Florida lifestyle. But here was the problem. The developers had not planned adequate water access. They assumed everyone would keep their boats at marinas or have small docks, but they had severely underestimated how many residents would want to trailer their boats. My grandfather had taught me that a good deal benefits everyone. So I agreed to grant the HOA and its residents access to my boat launch for a fee of $1 per year. In exchange, they would maintain insurance, respect posted hours, and most importantly, not interfere with my charter fishing business. We drew up a formal easement agreement, signed and notarized, filed with the county. Everyone was happy. For the first 3 years, everything worked smoothly. The residents loved having easy water access. I barely noticed the extra traffic since most people launched early morning or evening, and I was usually out on charters anyway. I waved to neighbors, they waved back, and life was good. Then I decided to expand my business. Charter fishing had been going incredibly well. I had built a reputation for finding the big ones: tarpon, snook, redfish, and grouper. My calendar was booked solid from March through November, and I had a waiting list. I was running 2 boats by 2024, and I hired my buddy Marcus to captain the second one. But I was turning away business, especially from larger groups and corporate events. That is when I got the idea for the pier. I wanted to build a proper charter fishing pier extending about 80 feet into the harbor. Nothing fancy, just a solid structure where groups could fish comfortably without needing a boat. I would charge by the hour, provide all the equipment, bait, and expertise. Families could come out, kids could fish safely, and I could accommodate the customers I had been turning away. Plus, it would create another revenue stream during the slower winter months. I did everything by the book. I hired a marine contractor, applied for all the necessary permits from the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, the Army Corps of Engineers, and Charlotte County. The environmental surveys came back clean. The engineers confirmed the structure would not impact navigation or wildlife. After 4 months of paperwork and waiting, I received approval to build. Construction started in January 2025. The contractor assured me it would take 6 weeks, weather permitting. I was excited, already taking advance reservations for the pier's grand opening in March, right at the start of peak season. That is when I received the letter. It arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, delivered by certified mail. The return address showed the Sunset Cove HOA. I figured it was just a routine notification about something, maybe a community event or a reminder about the easement terms. I was wrong. The letter was from Brenda Carmichael, the HOA president. It was 2 pages of single-spaced text, citing various sections of the HOA covenants and restrictions. The core message was clear. My charter fishing pier violated the community's aesthetic standards and property value protections. According to Brenda, the pier constituted a commercial structure that was incompatible with the residential character of Sunset Cove. She demanded I cease construction immediately and remove any completed portions of the pier within 30 days. I read the letter 3 times, each time growing more confused and angry. My property was not part of the HOA. I had never signed their covenants. My land predated their development by decades. They had absolutely no authority over what I built on my own property, especially since I had all the proper government permits. I called my lawyer, Tom Henderson, who had handled the original easement agreement. He read the letter and laughed, but not in a good way. "This is absurd," Tom said. "They have no legal standing whatsoever. Your property is not in their jurisdiction. Their covenants do not apply to you. So I just ignore it." "You could, but I would recommend we send a response making our position crystal clear. Sometimes these HOA boards get power-hungry and need a reminder of reality." Tom drafted a polite but firm response explaining that my property was not subject to HOA authority, that all construction was properly permitted by the appropriate government agencies, and that I intended to complete the project as planned. We sent it via certified mail and email. 3 days later, Brenda showed up at my property in person. I was down at the construction site, watching the contractor's crew install the pier pilings. It was hard work, requiring a barge-mounted drill to sink the treated pine posts deep into the harbor bottom. The sound of the hydraulic drill echoed across the water. "Excuse me, excuse me." A shrill voice cut through the mechanical noise. I turned to see a woman in her mid-50s marching down my lawn toward the water. She wore white capri pants, a floral blouse, and oversized sunglasses. Her highlighted blonde hair was cut in that aggressive bob that seemed to be the unofficial uniform of difficult people everywhere. "Can I help you?" I asked, though I already suspected who this was. "I'm Brenda Carmichael, president of the Sunset Cove Homeowners Association. I'm here about this." She gestured dramatically at the partially constructed pier. "You received our cease and desist letter. Why is construction continuing?" "Because I own this property, and I have all the necessary permits from the actual authorities that have jurisdiction. The HOA has a responsibility to maintain property values for all residents. This commercial fishing pier is an eyesore that will negatively impact home values in Sunset Cove." I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "Mrs. Carmichael, my property is not part of your HOA. Your rules do not apply here. I'm not sure how to make that any clearer. Your property may not technically be within our boundaries, but your actions directly affect our community. We have rights. You have the right to manage properties within your development. You do not have the right to tell me what I can build on my own land, especially when I have government approval." Her face reddened. "This is not over. The HOA will take appropriate action. You do what you need to do, madam. I'm building my pier." She turned and stalked back toward the development, pulling out her phone before she even reached her car. I shook my head and returned to supervising the construction. Over the next 2 weeks, things escalated quickly. Brenda launched a full campaign against my pier. She organized a petition among Sunset Cove residents, claiming the pier would bring noise, traffic, and undesirable elements to the neighborhood. She contacted the local newspaper, painting me as a greedy businessman destroying the peaceful residential character of the area. She even showed up at a Charlotte County Commission meeting to complain, though the commissioners politely explained they had already issued all proper permits after thorough review. I tried to ignore it and focus on the construction, which was progressing nicely. The pier was taking shape, a sturdy structure with railings and built-in rod holders. My contractor predicted we would finish ahead of schedule. Then Brenda made her big move. On February 15th, I received another certified letter from the HOA. This one was even longer, and it was not a request. The HOA board had voted unanimously to ban my use of the charter fishing pier, claiming it violated the terms of the boat launch easement. According to their twisted logic, the easement agreement specified that I would not expand my commercial operations in ways that negatively impacted the community's use and enjoyment of the boat launch. They argued that the pier would bring significantly more customers to my property, creating traffic, noise, and congestion that would interfere with residents' access to the boat launch. Therefore, they were exercising their right under the easement to prohibit my operation of the pier for commercial purposes. It was complete nonsense, but it was creative nonsense. They were trying to use the easement I had granted them as a weapon against me. Tom read the letter, and his earlier amusement turned to genuine concern. "This is more problematic," he admitted. "They are misinterpreting the easement terms, but there is language in there about not interfering with their use. It is a stretch, but they could try to tie you up in court over this." Can they actually stop me? Not legally, no. But they could sue for an injunction, and even if they lose, which they would, it could delay your opening and cost you money in legal fees and lost revenue. So what do I do? We could seek a declaratory judgment, essentially ask a court to rule that the easement does not give them any authority over your pier, but that also costs time and money. I sat in Tom's office, staring out at the parking lot, feeling the frustration build. This was my property, my business, my livelihood. I had done everything right, jumped through every regulatory hoop, and now some power-hungry HOA president was trying to destroy everything because she did not like how it looked from her community. That is when I remembered something important. "Tom, who owns the boat launch, you do. It is part of your property. And the easement, how does it work exactly?" Tom pulled up the document on his computer. "You granted them access for $1 per year, with terms regarding insurance and hours of use. It is a perpetual easement, meaning it stays with the property even if you sell, but—" He paused, reading more carefully. "There is a clause here. Either party can terminate the agreement with 90 days written notice." I felt a smile forming. "So I could revoke their access?" "Technically, yes. You would need to provide proper notice and it would not take effect for 90 days, but yes, you could terminate the easement. And without access to my boat launch, where would the Sunset Cove residents launch their boats?" Tom checked his computer, pulling up a map. "The next public boat ramp is at Ponce de Leon Park, about 8 miles north, and that one gets very crowded. The nearest private marina with launch facilities is even farther, and they charge premium rates." I leaned back in my chair, thinking it through. This would hurt the residents, many of whom were perfectly nice people who had nothing to do with Brenda's crusade. But Brenda was claiming to act on behalf of the HOA, which meant the board had voted to support this. They had made a choice to come after me. "Draft the notice," I said. "If they want to ban my pier, I'll revoke their boat launch access." Tom looked uncertain. "Kyle, this is going to create a lot of anger. Are you sure? They started this fight, I'm just finishing it." The notice went out the next day. It was professional and straightforward, citing the termination clause in the easement agreement and providing the required 90 days notice. Effective May 16th, the Sunset Cove HOA and its residents would no longer have access to the boat launch on my property. The reaction was volcanic. My phone started ringing within hours. Angry residents, some I had never met, called to yell at me. How could I do this? Did I know how much they paid for their homes? Did I know how important boat access was? Didn't I care about my neighbors? I explained the situation to those who would listen. I had not started this fight. The HOA had tried to ban my legal, permitted business. I was simply exercising my legal rights regarding my own property, just as they claimed to be doing. Some understood. Many did not. Brenda called me directly, and that conversation was something else entirely. "You cannot do this," she shrieked into the phone. "That boat launch is a community amenity." "It is my property," I replied calmly. "And according to the easement we both signed, I can terminate with proper notice. I've provided that notice. This is blackmail. This is extortion." "No, this is business. You tried to ban my pier based on a ridiculous interpretation of our agreement. I'm terminating that agreement. It is all perfectly legal. We will sue you for everything you have. You are welcome to try, but I would remind you that I've done nothing wrong. I have every permit I need, and I'm exercising my clear rights under a contract you signed. How do you think a judge will view an HOA trying to control property outside its jurisdiction?" She hung up on me. The next few days were intense. I received a flurry of legal threats from the HOA's attorney, all of which Tom systematically demolished. The pier construction continued without interruption, and it looked beautiful. The contractor finished 2 days early, and I scheduled the grand opening for March 1st. Meanwhile, chaos erupted in Sunset Cove. I heard through the grapevine that an emergency HOA meeting was called. Apparently, many residents were furious, not at me, but at Brenda. They had not realized she was going after my pier, and they certainly had not been consulted about the decision to try to ban it. Now they were losing their boat launch access because of her crusade. A group of residents organized a petition to recall Brenda from the HOA board. She fought back, claiming she was protecting property values and that I was the villain trying to destroy their community. The Sunset Cove Facebook group turned into a war zone, with residents taking sides and posting long rants about property rights, HOA authority, and who was really to blame. I stayed out of it and focused on my business. The charter fishing pier opened on March 1st to a fantastic response. I had a ribbon-cutting ceremony, invited local media, and the story got picked up by several news outlets. The angle was irresistible. Local businessman builds fishing pier, HOA tries to shut him down, businessman revokes their boat launch access. Public opinion was overwhelmingly on my side. Families loved the pier. I could accommodate groups of 15 or 20 people comfortably, and the fishing was excellent. We caught snook, redfish, and even a few small tarpon right from the pier. My revenue projections were conservative, but we exceeded them in the first week. Meanwhile, the 90-day clock ticked down toward May 16th. Some Sunset Cove residents tried to negotiate with me individually. A nice retired couple, the Martins, came to my door one evening. They had a beautiful 20-foot boat they had used every weekend, and they were devastated about losing the convenient launch access. "We understand you are upset," Mrs. Martin said. "And honestly, we think Brenda was completely out of line. We did not even know she was going after your pier until it was too late. We voted against the recall effort because we think what she did was wrong," Mr. Martin added. "Is there any way we could work something out? Maybe we could pay you directly for launch access." I felt genuinely bad for them. They were good people caught in a mess they did not create. But I also knew that making individual exceptions would undermine my position and create administrative nightmares. "I appreciate you coming to talk to me," I said, "but this is really between me and the HOA. If the board wants to negotiate, I'm open to that conversation." "Brenda will never back down," Mrs. Martin said sadly. "She is convinced she is right." They left, and I felt the weight of the situation. This was not just about Brenda anymore. Real people were being hurt. But I also knew that backing down would mean accepting the HOA's authority over my property, and I could not do that. As May approached, the pressure intensified. Local news did follow-up stories. The HOA hired a new lawyer who sent threatening letters about breach of contract and property rights. Tom responded to each one, methodically explaining why they were wrong. Then something unexpected happened. On April 20th, I received a call from a man named Robert Chen. He identified himself as a new member of the Sunset Cove HOA board, elected in an emergency special election that had resulted in major turnover. Brenda was still president, but barely, and several of her allies had been voted out. "Mr. Patterson, I'm calling because I think we need to resolve this situation," Robert said. "What happened with your peer was wrong. The board exceeded its authority, and I want to apologize on behalf of the new board members." "I appreciate that," I said cautiously. "Several of us have been reviewing the situation, and we believe there is a path forward. The HOA will formally withdraw its objection to your charter fishing pier and issue a public statement acknowledging we had no authority to interfere with your property. In exchange, we would like to discuss continuing the boat launch easement. Who else is on board with this?" 4 of the 7 board members. Brenda and 2 others still oppose any compromise, but we have the votes to make this happen. "What about Brenda? Is she going to keep fighting?" "Honestly, we are working on removing her as president. But regardless of her position, the board as a whole can make decisions. We want to fix this." I talked it over with Tom, who thought it was a reasonable opening. We arranged a formal meeting with the HOA board for April 25th. The meeting was held at the Sunset Cove Clubhouse, a nice facility with a view of the community pool and landscaped common areas. 7 board members sat on one side of a long table. Robert Chen, a sharp-looking man in his 40s who apparently worked in technology, was there along with 3 other new members who seemed reasonable. Brenda sat at the head of the table, glaring at me with undisguised hostility. 2 older board members flanked her, looking uncomfortable. Tom and I sat on the other side along with Marcus, who I had brought for moral support. Robert opened the meeting. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Patterson. As I mentioned on the phone, we want to resolve this dispute. The board has prepared a formal statement." He slid a document across the table. I read it carefully. It was everything Robert had promised. A full acknowledgement that the HOA had no authority over my property, a withdrawal of all objections to the pier, and an apology for the attempted interference with my business. "This is acceptable," I said, "but I want to be clear about something. I built that pier legally and properly. I will not accept any conditions or restrictions on how I operate it." "Understood," Robert said. "We are not asking for any such restrictions. Your business is your business." Brenda could not stay quiet any longer. "This is a betrayal of everything the HOA stands for. That pier is a blight on our community, and you are all cowards for giving in to his extortion." "Brenda, please," Robert said wearily. "We have discussed this extensively. The majority has decided." "I vote against this statement," Brenda snapped. "And I'm sure Gerald and Patricia agree with me." The 2 board members next to her nodded reluctantly. "Noted," Robert said, "but 4 votes are sufficient for approval. the statement will be issued. Now, regarding the boat launch easement, we would like to negotiate a continuation of access. Under what terms? I asked. The same terms as before, essentially. $1 per year with appropriate insurance and usage hours. We would also like to add language making it explicitly clear that the HOA has no authority over your property or business operations beyond the specific terms of the easement itself. Tom and I exchanged glances. This was actually better than the original agreement. I want one additional term, I said. Any future disputes regarding the easement must go to mediation before either party can pursue legal action, and the HOA agrees to pay for my legal fees in this current matter. Robert nodded slowly. The legal fees are fair, given that this was our mistake. How much are we talking about? Tom had prepared for this. $15,000 for my work on this matter plus Mr. Patterson's time and stress. I think a total of $20,000 is reasonable. Brenda exploded. $20,000. This is outrageous. You are robbing this community. You started a legal fight you could not win, I said, looking directly at her. Actions have consequences. $20,000 is a bargain compared to what you would pay if we went to court and I sued for damages, harassment, and legal fees. The board members huddled together, speaking in low voices. Finally, Robert turned back to us. We need to take this to a vote of the full membership for an expense this large. Can you give us 2 weeks? The easement termination takes effect May 16th, I reminded them. That is less than a month away. We will hold an emergency meeting next week. If approved, can we have the easement reinstated immediately rather than waiting 90 days? I thought about it. The residents had already been through enough turmoil. If the membership approves the payment and signs the new easement agreement, I'll reinstate access immediately. The meeting adjourned. As we walked out, I heard Brenda arguing loudly with the other board members, insisting they were making a terrible mistake. The special membership meeting was held on May 2nd. Tom and I were invited to attend and present our perspective. The Sunset Cove clubhouse was packed with residents, easily 100 people in a space meant for 75. The energy was tense but not hostile, at least not toward me. Robert chaired the meeting and laid out the situation clearly. He explained the original easement, Brenda's campaign against my Pier, the attempted ban, and my revocation of the boat launch access. He then presented the proposed settlement, HOA acknowledgement of wrongdoing, payment of $20,000, and a new easement agreement with stronger protections for both parties. The board recommends approval of this settlement, Robert said. It resolves the legal issues, restores our boat launch access, and prevents costly litigation. Before we vote, we will hear from Mr. Patterson and anyone else who wishes to speak. I stood up and faced the room. I want to start by saying I never wanted this fight. I built my charter fishing pier legally and properly. All I wanted was to grow my business. When the HOA tried to shut me down despite having no legal authority to do so, I responded by exercising my own property rights. I understand that hurt many of you, and I'm sorry for that. But I was not going to let anyone, HOA or otherwise, dictate what I can do with my own land. I paused, making eye contact with various residents. I've lived here longer than this development has existed. My family has owned that property since 1987. I granted you access to my boat launch out of neighborly goodness, and that bit me when your HOA tried to use it against me. The settlement being proposed is fair. It acknowledges reality, compensates me for the legal battle I did not start, and lets all of us move forward. I recommend you approve it. Several residents stood to speak. The Martins spoke in favor of the settlement, describing how they had tried to work with me individually and found me reasonable. A few of Brenda's supporters spoke against it, calling it extortion and arguing that the HOA should fight on principle. Then a younger man I recognized as someone who had used the boat launch regularly stood up. His name was David something, and he looked angry. "I want to know how we got here in the first place," he said. "I bought my house specifically because of the boat launch access. I moved my family here from Tampa, and I use that launch every weekend. When I lost access because of this fight, I looked into the history. From what I can tell, Mrs. Carmichael went after Mr. Patterson's pier without properly consulting the membership, or even getting legal advice about whether the HOA had any standing. She created this entire problem." Brenda stood up. "I was protecting property values. That is my job as HOA president." "Your job is to manage the community within the law," David shot back. "You overstepped your authority, and now we are paying $20,000 to fix your mistake. I think you should resign." The room erupted in competing shouts of agreement and disagreement. Robert had to bang his gavel repeatedly to restore order. "We are not here to discuss board composition," he said firmly. "We are here to vote on the settlement. Let's move forward." The vote was conducted by secret ballot to avoid intimidation. Tom and I stepped outside while the counting happened. The evening was beautiful, warm but not hot, with a gentle breeze coming off the water. I could see my pier in the distance, lights illuminating the structure as a couple of late-evening fishermen tried their luck. After 20 minutes, Robert came out. "It passed. 73 in favor, 22 against. We have a deal." Relief washed over me. "When can we sign the paperwork?" "Our attorney is finalizing it now. We can execute everything tomorrow if your lawyer approves the final language." We shook hands, and I felt the tension of the past 3 months finally beginning to ease. The new easement agreement was signed on May 3rd. The HOA issued its public statement acknowledging they had exceeded their authority. A check for $20,000 was presented to me at a brief ceremony that Robert insisted on, wanting to show the community that the matter was fully resolved. Brenda was notably absent. I learned later that she had resigned as HOA president the day after the membership vote, though she remained on the board. Her influence was broken, and the new leadership was focused on running the community properly rather than waging ideological battles. The boat launch reopened to Sunset Cove residents immediately. I saw the Martins out on the water that very weekend, waving enthusiastically as they cruised past my pier. Business was booming. The charter fishing pier was exceeding all expectations, and the publicity from the HOA fight had actually helped rather than hurt. I got inquiries from all over Florida, and beyond from people who had heard about the stand I took against HOA overreach. Several news outlets ran features about the case, and I even got interviewed on a podcast about property rights. Marcus and I hired a third captain to handle the increased demand. We expanded our fleet to include a larger boat for offshore trips. The pier became a destination for families, bachelor parties, corporate events, and serious anglers. On a good day, we had 40 or 50 people fishing from the pier and taking out charter boats. One Saturday morning in June, I was down at the pier helping a family with their fishing gear when I noticed someone standing at the base of the structure, looking out at the water. It was Brenda. I walked over, curious and a bit wary. "Can I help you with something?" She turned to me, and I was surprised to see that she looked tired and older than I remembered. The fierce anger had been replaced by something else, something harder to define. "I wanted to see it for myself," she said quietly. "Your pier. Everyone talks about how nice it is." "It is a good pier," I said carefully. We have been very happy with how it turned out. I owe you an apology, she said, and now I was genuinely shocked. I was wrong. About everything. I convinced myself that I was protecting the community, but really I was just being controlling. I did not like that you had something I could not regulate, so I tried to find a way to stop you. It was petty and it was wrong. I did not know what to say. This was the last thing I expected. I've been removed as president, she continued. And honestly, it is a relief. I was consumed by that position, by trying to make everything perfect according to my vision. I forgot that other people have rights and dreams too. Your grandfather owned this land before any of us got here. You had every right to build your pier. I appreciate you saying that, I said. It takes courage to admit when you are wrong. I've lost friends over this, people in the community who will not even look at me anymore. I deserve that, I suppose. People make mistakes. What matters is what you do after. She nodded slowly, then extended her hand. I hope your business continues to thrive, and I am sorry for the trouble I caused. We shook hands and she walked back toward the development. I watched her go, feeling an unexpected sense of closure. The summer was fantastic. Tourist season brought people from all over, and my 3 boats were running constantly. The pier had a waiting list on weekends. I hired additional staff to handle the increased volume, including a couple of local teenagers who needed summer jobs. In August, something interesting happened. Robert Chen from the HOA board approached me with a proposition. The community wanted to organize a fishing tournament for residents and their guests, and they wondered if I would be interested in partnering with them. They would pay to rent the pier and boats for a day, and I would provide the equipment and expertise. The goal is to build better relationships between the community and your business, Robert explained. Show people that we can coexist and even support each other. I agreed, and the tournament was held in September. We had 30 participants, ranging from experienced anglers to kids catching their first fish. I donated my time and we set up prizes for various categories: biggest fish, most fish, best junior angler. The event was a huge success, creating genuine goodwill between me and the Sunset Cove residents. Mrs. Martin won the prize for biggest snook, landing a 32-inch beauty that put up an incredible fight. The joy on her face when we took the photo was worth more than any amount of money. As fall approached and the tourist season began to wind down, I had time to reflect on everything that had happened. The fight with the HOA had been stressful and expensive, but it had also clarified important principles. I had stood up for my property rights, refused to be bullied, and ultimately prevailed. The business had grown beyond my most optimistic projections. More importantly, I had learned something about people and communities. Brenda's apology had stuck with me. She had been wrong, certainly, but she had also been human. People get caught up in power and control. They make bad decisions, and sometimes they learn from those mistakes. The residents of Sunset Cove were not a monolithic entity. They were individuals with different perspectives, and most of them just wanted to enjoy their homes and boats without drama. In November, the HOA held elections for the board. Robert was elected president by a wide margin. His platform was transparency, fiscal responsibility, and respecting the rights of all property owners, including those outside the HOA. It was a dramatic change from the previous administration. One evening, Tom and I met for dinner at a waterfront restaurant in Punta Gorda, celebrating the successful resolution of everything. We sat outside, watching boats navigate the harbor as the sun set over the water. You know, when Brenda first sent that letter, I thought this could go very badly, Tom admitted. HOA disputes can drag on for years and cost fortunes in legal fees. What made the difference? I asked. You had a strong legal position and you were willing to use leverage strategically. Revoking the boat launch access was a bold move, but it forced the community to confront the real consequences of the HOA's actions. And you were reasonable when they came to negotiate. That combination is rare. I just wanted to build my pier and run my business. That is what made it work. You were not trying to hurt anyone or prove a point. You were defending legitimate interests. That resonated with people. We finished dinner and I drove back to my property as night fell. The pier was lit up, the lights reflecting off the dark water. A few night fishermen were out there, trying for snook and tarpon that feed in the darkness. I could hear their voices carrying across the water, excited shouts when someone got a hit. I sat on my back porch for a while, drinking a beer and listening to the sounds of the harbor. A boat motored past slowly, heading back to someone's dock after an evening cruise. In the distance, I could see the lights of Sunset Cove, 40 homes full of families and retirees living their Florida dreams. My phone buzzed with an email. It was a reservation request for a corporate charter in December, a tech company from Miami wanting to bring their whole team for a day of fishing. I confirmed it and added it to the calendar. The schedule was already filling up for the winter season, which was remarkable considering it was usually the slowest time of year. As I sat there in the quiet night, I realized that everything had worked out better than I could have imagined. The pier was a success, the HOA had backed down, relationships with the community had actually improved, and my business was thriving. Sometimes standing your ground, even when it is difficult and stressful, leads to outcomes that benefit everyone. The whole experience had taught me valuable lessons about property rights, community dynamics, and the importance of clear legal agreements. It had also taught me about human nature, both its worst aspects and its capacity for growth and reconciliation. I thought about my grandfather, who had bought this land almost 40 years ago with a vision of creating something special on the water. He had built his modest dock and fished these waters for decades, finding peace and purpose in the simple act of casting a line. Now I was carrying on that legacy, but on a larger scale, sharing the joy of fishing with hundreds of people each year. The HOA fight could have destroyed all of that. Brenda's misguided attempt to control my property could have resulted in years of litigation, drained my resources, and prevented me from building the pier. But by standing firm on my rights and using strategic leverage, I had not only protected my interests, but also forced the community to confront the limits of HOA authority. In December, I received a holiday card from the Martins. Inside, they had written a note thanking me for resolving the boat launch situation and inviting me to their annual Christmas party. It was a small gesture, but it represented the healing that had occurred over the past year. I attended the party, which was held at their home in Sunset Cove. About 30 people were there, many of whom I recognized from the community. Robert Chen was there with his family. Even a couple of people who had initially opposed the settlement made a point of coming over to talk to me, admitting they had been wrong about the situation. Brenda was not there, and when I quietly asked Robert about her, he said she had moved away in November. Apparently, the stress of everything had been too much, and she decided to start fresh somewhere else. I felt a pang of sympathy for her, despite everything. She had made mistakes, but she had also apologized and tried to make amends before leaving. As the party wound down and I prepared to leave, Mrs. Martin pulled me aside. "I just want to say thank you again," she said. "Not just for the boat launch, but for how you handled everything. You could have been vindictive, but you were fair. That meant a lot to people." "I just wanted what was right," I said. "That is exactly why it mattered. I drove home that night feeling grateful for how things had turned out. The road from January to December had been rocky, full of conflict and stress and uncertainty. But by holding firm to my principles, refusing to be bullied, and remaining open to reasonable solutions, I had navigated through it successfully. The charter fishing business continued to grow. By the end of the year, we had served over 3,000 customers on the pier and countless more on the boat charters. Revenue had doubled compared to the previous year. I was able to give Marcus and my other employees substantial bonuses, and I started making plans for further expansion. In January 2026, exactly 1 year after I had started construction on the pier that caused so much controversy, I stood at the end of that structure looking out at Charlotte Harbor. The water was calm, reflecting the morning sun in brilliant shades of orange and gold. A pod of dolphins cruised past, their fins cutting through the surface in graceful arcs. Behind me, I heard voices as the first customers of the day arrived, a family from Ohio eager to experience Florida fishing. I turned to greet them, ready to share my love of the water and help them create memories that would last a lifetime. The fight with the HOA seemed like ancient history now, a stressful episode that had ultimately made everything stronger. My property rights were clearly established, my business was thriving, and my relationships with the community were better than ever. The pier stood as a testament not just to fishing and commerce, but to the importance of standing up for what is right. As I helped the family from Ohio get set up with fishing rods and bait, explaining the techniques for catching redfish and snook, I smiled to myself. This was exactly what my grandfather had envisioned when he bought this land. A place where people could connect with the water and find joy in the simple act of fishing. The HOA had tried to take that away, operating from a misguided belief that they had the authority to control everything around them. But property rights matter, legal boundaries matter, and sometimes you have to fight to protect what is yours. I had done that, and in the process, I had built something valuable and lasting. The sun climbed higher in the sky, the water sparkled with promise, and another perfect day on Charlotte Harbor began. The charter fishing pier stood solid and proud, a symbol of perseverance and the ultimate triumph of rights over overreach. And I stood there with my customers, doing exactly what I loved, in exactly the place I was meant to be.